pleasure to have you join us on another episode of the program. I am Okpeyemi Owosheni. We start off with business news. The Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms has proposed that the cost of tax collection by government agencies be reduced to 1%. Chairman of the committee, Taiwo Oyedele, disclosed this during the exposure and impact assessment session held for journalists in Abuja. According to Oyedele, Nigeria's tax collection cost is as high as 35% in some states. Oyedele also said there are plans to restructure the Federal Inland Revenue Service and rename it to Nigerian Revenue Service. Speaking to TV360 Nigeria, here's what Oyedele had to say.
We want to support this very important segment of our economy to be able to grow. They contribute a lot to our employment, to our GDP, but they struggle. Many of them cannot even survive 3-4 years, so they set up those businesses and they also go under. And in large part, tax is accountable for many of those reasons. So that is the reason for our proposal. And the good thing is, for the withholding tax regulation, it has now been signed by the minister. So this is not something that by law needs to go to the National Assembly. So by law, the law empowers the finance minister to sign the regulation, and that's what we have done.
We'll go on a break now and be back with corporate stories. Welcome back. The Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation, NDIC, says the payment of depositors at Heritage Bank will commence before the end of the week. The managing director of NDIC, Bello Hassan, disclosed this in a briefing on the liquidation of banks in Abuja on the 6th of June. The NDIC commenced the liquidation of Heritage Bank following the revocation of its banking license by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Hassan said that the total bank deposit at Heritage Bank starts at 650 billion naira, while its loan portfolio stands at over 700 billion naira. The NDIC MD said that all depositors are currently being verified for onward payment of insured benefits of 5 million naira, while depositors with insured deposit above 5 million naira will be paid upon the sale of the assets of the bank. We'll go on a break now, but when Money Matter returns, we'll be discussing the IMF's latest report on Nigeria's current account balance shooting up by $1.43 billion. I'll bring you details of this and more after this short break. Welcome back. Nigeria's current account balance has experienced a surplus of $1.432 billion in 2024. And this is according to a report by the International Monetary Fund, IMF. The report, titled World Economic Outlook Database, noted that the increase in the federal government account for the period was an improvement from the $1.21 billion surplus recorded in 2023. The improvement was attributed to the country's growing gross national savings and investment. Now, in 2024, Nigeria's gross national savings increased to 26.32% of gross domestic product, up from 24.61% in 2023. Total investment also rose to about 25.75% of GDP compared to the 24.28% in 2023. That's according to the IMF's report. A country's current account balance represents the combined total of its trade balance, net income, direct transfers, and assets income, providing a comprehensive picture of its international economic transactions. The IMF data provides a positive outlook for Nigeria's economic growth and stability, indicating a growing economy with increasing investment and savings. This trend is expected to continue, driving economic growth and stability in the region. The development comes as the country grapples with the aftermath of subsidy removal by President Bola Tinubu in May 2023. Electricity tariffs, food prices, transportation prices, house rent, as well as inflation rates have since skyrocketed, leading to the duo of the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress declaring a nationwide industrial strike on Monday, June the 3rd. The unions are asking for a living wage of 449,000 naira monthly, higher than the current 33,000 naira being paid by the federal government. The federal government and organized labor has, however, agreed on the fixing a new minimum wage that is above 60,000 naira. Now, joining me to discuss the IMF's finding is economist Olusegun Okunade. Thank you for joining me on the program, Mr. Okunade. Now, how significant is the $1.432 billion surplus in Nigeria's current account balance for 2024 when compared to 2023?
Yeah, thank you very much, Okoyemi. I think it's a good step in the right direction. When you talk about balances with our current balance with reserves, having a significant increase of 1.4 billion, but compared to the previous year. But there is more to this when it comes to other indices that we need to look through uh, as we continue in the discussion. So, but it's a right step. You can have a surplus is to tell you that you have more income that outweigh your expenditure, which can definitely give you a surplus.
Now, what are the key factors that contributed to this surplus, and how sustainable are these factors in the long term?
Yeah, first and foremost, you understand the fact that the major area for this administration was to see to the removal of subsidy, which we have considered as cankerworm that has been diverging or devolving so much of our resources as a nation. And with that, it gives so much income to the government in which they are able to use the resources to move into other aspects of it. So I would say that we've had more income coming into our coffers. And also, there seems to be slight increase in the crude oil production in the last few months, right from the beginning of this year, late last year. And that on its own has attributed to it. So it's more of having so much income. I believe we can do much more if you're able to tame or manage the cost of governance on the part of the government.
There was an increase of about 25.75 of GDP influence. How does this increase contribute or influence Nigeria's economic growth and stability?
Yeah, this increase in total investment, we can sustain it if we invest more on infrastructure that can generate more revenue. We've been able to, by all means, block maybe the few leakages that we have in the area of subsidy payment, and we are receiving more revenue. So it will be more nice if we can invest more in infrastructure that will aid the production that is being carried out as a nation. We seem to be more import dependent. We can start considering building factories, making security more priority in order to, attract those FDIs that Mr. President are actually galvanizing to have. So if we are able to maintain that and have good infrastructure, steady power supply, and the basic things that can make businesses to grow, I think it will be on the rising increase, just like we have with the Asian countries that are able to be intentional in making sure that they domesticate some of their things in such a way to be more productive, not to be import dependent as a nation.
Okay, according to the IMF's report, there is a suggestion of a positive outlook for Nigeria's economic growth and stability. Now, I would like to know what's the potential risks that could undermine this positive outlook.
Yeah, well, the IMF, even though some of us at times do not have so much confidence in their report, but if at this time they are giving kudos that we seem to have positive outlook, it implies that there are certain things that we must try as much as possible to see how we maintain it. One of it is look at a way to continue to improve on security. I have this to tell you that this country is blessed as a nation, and every part of the country has one resources or the other that are reliably, in commercial quantity that can be processed to generate more revenue. The other aspect of it that I feel we need to seriously work in tune with is the area of blocking leakages and reducing that epidemic we call corruption. It has entered and it's into the system, and we might see a significant growth in some of the reports that they are having. But if we do not tame these two monsters that is actually developing us as a nation, it might be difficult for us to sustain the growth because I still consider it as a fragile growth, of which, if considerably some measures are not put in place, we might see ourselves getting back to status quo. But be it as it may, let's work on the government being accountable to the people, transparent in their transaction, and work on security in such a way that the natural resources that we are blessed with as a nation, we can tap into it as against the illegal miners that are not generating revenue for the government, and the country as a whole can be more beneficial.
Well, you mentioned that Nigeria is blessed and we need to utilize our resources. What measures do you think the government can take to manage and reduce inflation in the current economic climate?
The major area of focus is how can we be more productive. We've not had it bad. As we speak, inflation stands at about 33.4%. That's a figure, but I know it's 33, above 33%. And the food inflation is as high as 40% as we speak. And you ask yourself, what are the things that need to be done? The major focal area is the area of security, because without security, you cannot have any meaningful investment that can, give that aspect of production. And I think that's an area that we are lacking. A lot of people, we have vast land, we have vast natural resources, that all we need is to have the political will of the government to provide security for the investors to come in, and even with the local indigene, be able to have a contributing factor to it. So if you ask me, that for us to sustain and have good economic climate, we need to work more on security. And not above that, how do we reduce the operating cost of some of these organizations that are coming in? The major area that consumes so much for every organization these days is the energy cost. Whichever way you want to talk about it, is it the power supply or even the alternative power supply, either diesel or petrol, that we need to buy at high exorbitant price. Government needs to be intentional in making sure that we have reduction in the energy cost for businesses to grow and survive. You can see the little that we have been faced with in current time as the exit of most multinational that has been in the country for a while is as a result of the high cost of operation and also inconsistency on the part of government policy that is really affecting and impacting on their operation. So if you're able to get these few things right, at least at the beginning, you discover that the long-term projection of the government for the growth of this economy will definitely be achievable as a nation.
Well, let's talk about the labor unions. We've been discussing this since the beginning of the week. Now, with the NLC and TUC demanding a living wage of above 60,000 naira monthly, how realistic do you think is this demand, given Nigeria's current economic condition?
Thank you very much, Bayemi. A valid question. You see, my perspective about the yearning of NLC is that we have misplacement of priority, and their request to actually increase the wages or living wage or whatever name they call it is misplacement of priority. This, as we speak, will definitely increase our inflation rate because you have so much money chasing few goods, and that on its own will create more problem as an individual. Some of us have made the suggestion that rather than we exhibiting our energy in looking for minimum wage, can we engage the government, objectively and constructively in making sure to make available those indices that will assist in growing the economy. Take, for example, the functionality of our refinery. We go a long way in making sure that the energy cost that we are faced with in the nation is actually reduced, because that on its own has impact on logistics. The movement of goods and services from one place to the other has a contributing factor to the cost as to which an average citizen will have. Also, when you talked about the same energy cost, it impacts on production that do not give the sustainability that every industry or organization requires. So you discover that if some of the energy we are channeling in requesting for increase in minimum wage is channeled towards having basic infrastructure, having some of the government assets being utilized in a maximal way in making production, we will be better off for it. For me, I'm not an advocate subscribing to the increase in the wages, because as an employer of labor, I can tell you the organized private sector will eat out of it. Take, for example, the organization. If the minimum wage is increased above 60,000, it implies that it cut across all cadres. You must increase your salary. Where's the productivity that we are faced with currently? A lot of the companies are bleeding, and they are actually, asking for reliefs, cushion effect on things that they are doing. And the only thing you can bring about is to increase the personnel cost. That on its own is not sustainable. We have said it. Let NLC look for a way to engage the government for more productivity in such a way that we can start producing things and utilizing things and ease the burden that we have on our foreign exchange as against everything being imported and putting so much pressure even on the little that we have. If we can do some of these things, I think it will be better. But I'm not an advocate of we saying that we should continue to increase salary, because the more you increase, imagine as at the time there was increment of minimum wage to 18, from 18 to 30,000, you discover that the cost of dollar then, the cost of foreign exchange is quite, of germane. Now that we have it at 30,000, what is the equivalent of it? It has reduced the purchasing power of an average citizen. So I feel rather than asking for increase in minimum wage, NLC should engage the government in making sure that they provide those certain infrastructure that will assist in increasing the economic power of an average citizen, providing security, have the basic infrastructure in terms of health, quality education, like some of us enjoy while we're growing up. And that on its own will create a positive economic outlook for our nation. Those that are actually jumper out of this country, if you permit me to use that word, can start having a rethink of coming back home with the enormity of the resources that we are blessed with. But I think the request of Labour, if you ask me, is misplacement of priority rather than saying that we should concentrate more on the area of providing and monitoring government to put our assets and natural resources that are blessed with in the hands of people to go around every citizen of this country.
Okay, Mr. Okwade, while you were speaking, you mentioned that instead of asking for a new minimum wage, the labor union should ask the government to implement policies that will make the economy better. How do you think they can go about this?
Yeah, this is simple to achieve, if you ask me, because some of the people that are agitating for increment, for very few, if you see the statistics of the government, they are only fighting for 1.2 million of the worker out of the several, not putting into consideration the OPC. But we can engage government based on their promises and putting timeline to the execution. Take, for example, this administration, while they came in May, gave a commitment that the Port Harcourt refinery will be functional by December. Here we are in the month of June. We have not had a single production of that particular thing. Maybe they are managing it, not sharing with us, the populace, to have a privileged knowledge of some of this stuff. But I can tell you that that's an area, if you've been able to tame that, just like the last administration came and left the promise to rehabilitate or resuscitate some of this refinery, but not a single one was actually brought to light. So we can start engaging them. When you talk about the health sector, you make it intentional in such a way that our law, the legislators makes law in such a way that every one of us take our medical stuff here. The atmosphere of government officials, going about celebrating their children, their works, outside the shore of this country, and all creating problem for our education sector should definitely be discouraged. If you must be in power, then definitely you must believe in the country to do some of it. These are things that NLC should engage the government, and above all, speak to the humongous amount of money that is actually in circulation. When you see something, say something, act on it, and let's see that we have sanity in our system, because that's the major epidemic that is eating hard into our system. Everybody just wants to get there and see how they can have a fair share of their deal, not minding the implication on the generality of the citizen.
Okay, since the beginning of President Tinubu's administration, the economy has seen so many policies. Now, I would like to know how effective you think the recent government policies has been in addressing the economic challenges faced by Nigeria.
Well, I would say they are trying their best, but there seems to be inconsistency in the policy. Just this morning, I was reading that the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Economy is coming to tell us that subsidy might go to about 5.4 trillion. I'm yet to validate that statement because it sounds absurd, because it's the same minister that came up to tell us that we now have so much surplus in terms of our funds because of the subsidy removal. And here we are again talking about that. And now when you look at the coercion, the Minister of State for Petroleum is saying subsidy at no point is being paid. But the man that is disbursing the money is making that revelation to say we have a projection of about 5.4 trillion to pay in this year 2024. So you imagine so many foreign direct investment that believed in this administration with the removal of that subsidy is having a rethink, because we seems not to be consistent with our policy. Look at the level at which we are actually having in terms of interest rate. It has gone as high as 26%. You ask yourself, which business do you want to do that you take out the interest rate of 26% and you still have margin to continue as a going concern, which the organization is supposed to carry out? So you discover that the government needs to work more and let have stability in the area of this government policy, not really raising one today and tomorrow we're having a counterproduction, or different agencies are working at different ends, not syncing everything that we are putting together. I think it's an area that the government needs to concentrate on if indeed we must grow the economy the more and attract the FDIs that we claim that we are bringing into the country. But if the policy is inconsistent, take for example in terms of monetary, fiscal, and some of those things, the presidential tax force was set up, and we're told that there won't be additional. In fact, they are planning to streamline the taxes to be paid. But thank God for the president that waiting. We already had like 2-3 other new taxes that were being introduced when we're trying to. So you can imagine when you have inconsistency in the aspect of policy formulation or implementation, that on its own discourages businesses from actually operating in our environment. But if you're able to work on this, I think we have more guarantee as a nation to be there and to have the better nation that we all crave for.
What further policy measures do you recommend to improve Nigeria's economic situation, particularly in terms of investment and savings? Because I feel like that's one area so many people have been struggling with due to the high rate of inflation.
Yeah, I think the area I want to concentrate more when it comes to policy is to see how we can implement certain policy direction in area of transparency and accuracy that we claim to be projecting as a nation. You see, so much is in the hands of few without anybody accounting for the major. And there are no punishment in terms of reprimanding those that are actually committing this act until we get intentional about having consequences for those that are actually doing wrongdoing. We may not be going far as a country, because what we see is that somebody will steal 10 billion and be bargain, return 1 billion and go away with 9 billion. What you are encouraging is that the other people who want to steal 100 billion and come back and give you just 10 billion, since you understand that with 10% you're able to go. And maybe on a lighter note, I think 10% is only meant for God. So I feel government needs to be sincere and have that commitment and will on the part of fighting corruption in such a way that most of the people committing those atrocities can be exposed, and it will serve as deterrent to others. Also, I feel in the area of investment and savings, government needs to work harmoniously as every agency to work harmoniously within themselves in giving what we call unification of direction, unity of direction in the aspect of things that they are doing. Not every agency or department of the government working at different directions. It's really not too good when you hear some of these things. We heard that during the last administration when the fiscal policy was not intended with that of the monetary policy. When the two things are not syncing, how do you expect growth to be? But we tend to, at least for this administration, we seem to have a sync between them. But some of the suggestions being made by the highly respected people at the end of affairs should be implemented by the federal government so that we can have speedy, reaction of the people. I can tell you, because we are having this inconsistency in policy, it's creating a lot of unemployment. And when you have so much unemployment, what you're actually creating is insecurity because, an idle mind is devil's workshop. You just want to preoccupy your mind with something. And then when you see some people who are actually, still struggling with what they are doing and making some ends meet, you get, envious, and you might start attacking individual for what is not. So I feel the government needs to work more in the area of corruption. Let's be transparent in some of the transactions that have actually been carried out by the government. Let's be consequential in some of the people that are doing the wrongdoings and bring them to punishment so that it will serve as deterrent to others and the country can continue to enjoy, generally the blessings that we have through natural resources and the endowment of the intellectual on the part of the citizen.
Now, just before I let you go, what is your forecast for Nigeria's economic performance in the next 2 to 3 years, considering current trends and government policies?
Yeah, well, if the government is more intentional in their policy formulation, I can talk the monetary and fiscal policy, some of the work that the Presidential Task Force is actually carrying out. If it's implemented to the letter, we have a better chances of having growth as a nation. But some of the things that is affecting the production arm of our government, aside insecurity, is the multiplicity of taxation, which the president spoke to while he assumed office. And I know that a lot of work has been carried out by the current presidential tax force. So if we can have a sync in the implementation of some of this policy, you see our companies, reviving back. Because if a country does not have the industrial arm functioning well, it becomes a problem. You see, the country is blessed with a lot of intellectual. So many of our young ones are performing well in the area of information technology. But you ask yourself, do we have the infrastructure, the up to, sustain some of the things they are doing? A lot of them rely on international partnership for survival. So if the government can build infrastructure on their part, we see a better nation in the next 2 or 3 years. But if we continue to have somersault and inconsistency with our policy because of personal gain of individual, the more we see that, the more Nigeria keeps nosediving, and it is the citizen that bears that particular burden. And on the final note, I think the government needs to be intentional in terms of security, because a secure environment is a prosperous nation.
Well, economist Olusegun Okunade, many thanks for lending your thoughts on the program. That's it on this episode of the program. Many thanks for joining us. I am Okpeyemi Uwosheni. See you next time.